The alarms blared through the cold data center as AvaSullivan traced the failing core system with steady breath. The screens flickered like dying stars, yet her hands moved fast, precise, refusing to surrender to chaos. Outside the glass wall, executives slept easy, unaware that their empire was seconds from collapsing into dust. Ava's voice cut through the tension, guiding her exhausted team as if she were steering a ship through a storm. She knew none of this heroism would matter by sunrise, not in a company ruled by ego and quiet betrayal. Still, she pushed forward, stitching broken code together while the clock hammered against her ribs like a warning. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the truth sharpening. This night would not save her, but it would change everything. AvaSullivan arrived at the office before the sun rose, her steps heavy from the long night she had just survived. The building felt colder than usual, as if it already sensed the storm hiding beneath its polished surface. She passed rows of empty desks, each one still scattered with energy drink cans and scribbled notes from the overnight crisis. Her team had saved sterling dynamics from a meltdown that could have erased 10 years of customer trust in a single breath. They had patched corrupted servers, rebuilt critical nodes, and stabilized the network seconds before a full shutdown. Ava replayed the chaos in her mind, remembering how every heartbeat felt like a ticking bomb ready to shatter the floor. But she also remembered the unity, the certainty that her team trusted her more than any executive ever had. When she reached her office, she found her team already gathered, exhausted but proud, waiting for the recognition they deserved. They joked softly, clinging to hope that this time, someone would acknowledge the truth behind the company's survival. Ava wanted to believe it too, even though the past warned her to expect nothing from the people upstairs. At 8 sharp, an alert chimed across every device in the building, announcing a company-wide message from the CEO. The team straightened instinctively, eyes brightening, ready to hear their names honored after a night of brutal effort. Ava opened the message and felt the air in her lungs compress into something sharp and bitter. The email praised the remarkable leadership and innovation of Harper Lane, a recent hire with a flawless smile and an empty resume. Ava scanned the lines twice, then 3 times, searching for any mention of her team, but there was nothing. Harper had not written a single line of code, had not stayed awake, had not even known about the crisis until morning. Yet the message painted her as the savior who single-handedly prevented a catastrophic data collapse. Silence spread through the room like a slow-moving poison, settling into every corner until no one dared to breathe. One engineer cursed under his breath, while another slammed her laptop shut, unable to hide the sting of betrayal. Ava kept her face still, but her pulse throbbed with the familiar ache of being erased by those who feared her talent. She told her team to stay calm, even though her voice trembled with the effort of holding the pieces together. Someone asked if she would escalate the issue, but Ava already knew the answer before the words were spoken. She had confronted the executives before, and each time the truth had been reshaped to fit their preferred narrative. Harper was Richard Cole's newest favorite, a rising pawn placed exactly where he needed her for his next maneuver. Ava realized the promotion was never about merit, but about control, a silent reminder of who held the power here. Her team looked to her for direction, but she could only offer a quiet promise that she would not forget this moment. The betrayal marked the beginning of something larger, something none of them could see yet, but all of them could feel. And deep inside, a spark of defiance ignited, small but bright enough to cut through the growing darkness around her. Richard Cole summoned Harper Lane to every high-level meeting that followed, placing her beside him like a trophy. Executives nodded at her every word, pretending she carried authority she had never earned or understood. Ava watched from a distance, silent, knowing the game had shifted into a darker, more calculated phase. Harper acted as if she had climbed the mountain herself, smiling at Ava with a sweetness sharpened into quiet mockery. Rumors spread through the halls, whispers hinting that Harper was the new face of innovation at Sterling Dynamics. Ava heard her own achievements retold with names rearranged, as if her presence in the company had become optional. Ethan Cole, Ava's husband, drifted further into his father's orbit, agreeing with decisions that slowly pushed Ava aside. He called it strategic repositioning, but Ava knew it was something far more personal than corporate restructuring. She confronted him one evening, asking why he defended lies he knew were crafted to erase her contributions. Ethan shrugged, sipping his drink, telling her that recognition didn't matter if the company still benefited from her work. He said it casually, like it was wisdom instead of the cruelty it carried beneath its polished surface. Ava stared at him, realizing he had grown comfortable living in the glow of influence his father provided. She asked him whether he cared that Harper was being credited for the system rescue his own wife had executed. He laughed softly and said, "It's not stealing if my father approves it," as if that ended the conversation. The words cut through her like a blade, slicing into the last pieces of trust she had tried to preserve. Something in Ava broke then, not loudly, but quietly, like a door closing in a long, empty hallway. At work, Richard began assigning Harper to projects Ava had built from the ground up, claiming it was time for new energy. Meetings that once depended on Ava's expertise suddenly excluded her, as if she had become inconvenient to the narrative. Harper carried printouts she didn't understand, presenting them as her own insights, stumbling through terms she misused. Executives praised her bravery, ignoring the team whispering corrections under their breath to keep the room from collapsing. Ava felt the walls tightening, not because she lacked power, but because power was being strategically stripped away. She saw the pattern clearly: discredit her, sideline her, isolate her, and eventually justify replacing her entirely. Her team noticed the shift too, watching with anger as the company rewarded manipulation over merit. Yet none of them spoke aloud, fearing retaliation from a leadership that had already chosen its narrative. At home, silence became the soundtrack of her evenings, thick and heavy and full of unspoken wounds. Ethan avoided her eyes, choosing convenience over loyalty, choosing his father's world over the woman he once admired. Ava realized she was fighting not just corporate corruption, but a family dynasty that protected itself at any cost. Every step she took felt measured, watched, assessed by people waiting for her to slip or lose control. But instead of breaking, she grew colder, sharper, more aware of the roles being assigned around her. The betrayal no longer shocked her. It shaped her, pressing her into someone who could no longer be silenced. And beneath the weight of manipulation, a new resolve formed, quiet, unshakable, and dangerous to the empire surrounding her. The meeting room smelled of polished wood and false smiles as Ava walked in, carrying nothing but a cardboard box. Richard Cole sat at the head of the table, Harper Lane by his side, both grinning like predators who had already won. He slid a printed email across the table, a fabricated complaint claiming Ava had acted erratically during the crisis. The accusation painted her as unfit, dangerous to the team, a liability no one could afford to keep around. Ava scanned the document, her hands steady, her face unreadable, letting the absurdity of the claim sink into the room. Harper's smile flickered as she realized Ava's calm made her look small, almost ridiculous next to her quiet authority. Executives whispered behind their hands, nodding at the email as if it were gospel, ignoring the months of Ava's contributions. Richard leaned back, satisfied, certain this was the final act of control over a woman who had dared challenge him. Ava set her box on the table, the soft thud echoing in the room like a defiant drumbeat against their orchestrated lies. She spoke once, her voice low but clear, telling them the truth in a way that made every false claim crumble silently. "No system collapses alone," she said. "You have every word, every line, every code we wrote to prevent this disaster. And none of it belongs to anyone here, except the people who risked their nights, saving this company." Richard's jaw tightened. Harper shifted, uncomfortable under Ava's unwavering gaze that held no fear. A hush fell over the room, the weight of truth pressing on the assembled executives who had long forgotten it mattered. Ava turned and walked out, her box under her arm, each step deliberate, filled with quiet rage and certainty. Then it happened. Her team rose in unison, 22 pairs of eyes full of loyalty and anger, each person standing from their chair. One by one, they placed their ID badges on the table and followed her out, leaving behind stunned executives and whispered excuses. The clatter of chairs echoed through the hallway, a sound heavier than any applause, marking the collapse of Richard's authority. The employees did not speak, did not argue, only walked beside Ava, each step a declaration of solidarity stronger than any memo. Harper watched them leave, her facade cracking as she realized recognition had no value without respect and integrity behind it. Richard slammed his hand on the table, but no one remained to witness his fury, the power he had wielded reduced to silence. Ava's box contained only essentials, but symbolically it carried the weight of years of stolen credit and unnoticed labor. Outside, the elevator doors closed, separating them from the empire they had saved, but which had refused to honor them. The city lights reflected off the glass as Ava and her team walked into the unknown, a group reborn from betrayal. For the first time, she felt the clarity of freedom, the sharp edge of control in her own hands instead of someone else. Every heart in the group beat with anticipation and fear, but also a shared conviction that they were no longer defined by lies. The hallway that once represented suppression now became a path of liberation, each footstep erasing the past. And as the doors shut behind them, Sterling Dynamics felt a tremor, an echo of the defiance they had unleashed. Ava glanced at her team, nodded once, and in that silent gesture they understood. Nothing would ever be the same again. The apartment was small, cramped, and buzzing with energy as Ava and her team arrived, 23 souls packed into one space. They set their boxes down and immediately began spreading ideas across the walls, scribbling notes with marker pens and sticky pads. Every corner held a plan, a concept, a dream that had been buried under months of office politics and stolen credit. Ava gathered her team, her voice steady, and outlined a vision that seemed impossible but exhilarating all the same. "We start from scratch," she said. "No offices, no bosses, no broken promises, just us and what we can build together." The room hummed with determination as her engineers, designers, and analysts leaned over laptops, sketchbooks, and whiteboards. They debated product ideas, argued about priorities, and laughed at absurd suggestions that sparked even better solutions. Each person knew they had nothing to lose, and the thrill of independence sharpened their creativity like a knife. Ava encouraged risk, celebrating failures as lessons, drawing confidence from the fact that every idea came from those who knew the system best. They envisioned a company built on trust, transparency, and innovation, a stark contrast to the hierarchy they had just escaped. No one was holding back. The energy was chaotic but fertile, a storm of collaboration that promised growth and reinvention. Investors had begun noticing the mass departure, curious about the team that had walked away from Sterling Dynamics together. Emails from venture scouts arrived, politely probing, offering meetings, and asking questions about the new venture in development. Ava replied cautiously, knowing that vision mattered more than early funding, and that their identity as creators was priceless. Every evening, the apartment transformed into a hub of ideas, with team members coding, testing, and brainstorming until late hours. They developed prototypes, ran simulations, and refined strategies, learning from mistakes in real time without corporate interference. The air was thick with determination, and the sense of ownership motivated every individual to push past exhaustion and doubt. By the second week, a brand identity began to emerge, a logo sketched on a notepad that symbolized rising from the ruins. They named the company NovaForge, a promise that they were forging something new from the destruction left behind. The name inspired everyone, a mantra repeated in late-night discussions and quiet moments of reflection alike. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced their belief that they could create a company worth more than stolen recognition. They shared meals, laughter, and frustrations, growing closer not just as colleagues, but as a family bound by shared purpose. Ava observed quietly, satisfied that the culture she had longed to create was finally taking root, free from interference and betrayal. The city outside carried on oblivious, unaware that in this small apartment, a force was building that could disrupt an empire. Every day brought new challenges, but the team tackled them together, each failure a stepping stone to a stronger foundation. By the end of the first month, the prototype was ready for internal testing, and the team's morale was higher than it had ever been. They celebrated small wins with quiet excitement, knowing that the path forward would be hard, but rewarding beyond measure. Ava looked around at her team and smiled, recognizing that the journey had begun, and the foundation of NovaForge was solid. The apartment, once a temporary refuge, had become the birthplace of ambition, resilience, and the dream of a company built on truth. Every person felt the spark of possibility, and for the first time in months, they believed that recognition and respect could finally be earned. Together, they had transformed betrayal into opportunity, creating a new world from the fragments of the old. Ava was reviewing code late one night when her phone rang, the number flashing unknown but urgent. The voice on the other end trembled, reporting a total system failure at Sterling Dynamics' Northeastern servers. Entire customer databases were gone, erased in an instant, leaving no backup and no hope of recovery. Ava's stomach sank as she realized the scope of the disaster, her mind racing through possible causes. She asked for details, listening as the engineer explained that Harper Lane had installed unauthorized software overnight. The program had bypassed security protocols and overwritten critical files, leaving the network in ruins. Ava's jaw tightened. This was the same person who had stolen credit for her work months ago. The chaos was total. Billing systems, client communications, and sensitive financial records all wiped clean. Executives panicked, calling emergency meetings, blaming each other, and scrambling for any solution. Ava knew she could fix it, but this time, she wasn't walking back into Sterling Dynamics. Her team in NovaForge worked fast, calculating the potential damage, running simulations to understand the fallout. The stock market reacted instantly, shares plummeting as news of the breach leaked to the press. Richard Cole's empire began to crumble, the carefully constructed image of control shattering under the weight of his own negligence. Board members demanded explanations, and when none could satisfy them, they voted him out in a sudden, unanimous decision. Ethan Cole reached out to Ava, his voice desperate, begging her to return and salvage what was left of the company. He promised her the CEO position, full authority, and every benefit she had ever deserved but was denied. Ava listened in silence, the echoes of betrayal still fresh in her mind from months of manipulation. She pictured Harper smiling, claiming victories she never earned, and felt no compulsion to rescue them. Every word Ethan spoke felt hollow, a desperate attempt to rewrite history for his own survival. Ava finally spoke, her tone calm but unyielding, telling him she would not return under any circumstances. Her refusal marked the end of her past, severing ties with the company and the people who had betrayed her. Richard tried to argue, but the board had already removed his power. His influence was gone, leaving him powerless and exposed. Harper was left to face the consequences of her reckless actions, unprepared for the backlash that followed. NovaForge, in contrast, watched from the outside, a team united, learning from every misstep Sterling had made. The disaster proved to investors and the industry that talent and integrity could not be contained or ignored. Ava's decision to walk away was bold, but it reinforced her vision of building a company where merit mattered above all. She and her team celebrated quietly, knowing their patience and perseverance had positioned them to rise above the chaos. Sterling Dynamics' collapse was total in the Northeast region, a cautionary tale of mismanagement and hubris. Ethan's pleas faded, replaced by news reports documenting the failures of his father's empire. Ava felt a sense of closure, the weight of past betrayals finally lifting as she focused entirely on her own future. NovaForge emerged stronger, prepared to seize opportunities Sterling had failed to protect or appreciate. Ava smiled at her team, confident that the lessons of Sterling Dynamics would guide their rise, not define their limits. The storm outside had destroyed a legacy, but inside their apartment, ambition burned brighter than ever. Every code line, every strategy, and every decision would now be theirs alone, untainted by betrayal or politics. And in that moment, Ava knew the future belonged entirely to those who had refused to be silenced. 6 months later, NovaForge had grown from a cramped apartment project into a company valued at $75 million. Investors marveled at the speed and precision with which Ava and her team executed their vision, defying industry expectations. Every prototype, every pitch, and every late-night code session had coalesced into a product people wanted and trusted. Ava walked through the open office, laptops humming, voices brainstorming, her team focused and confident in their mission. She no longer had to fight for recognition. Her work and her team's work spoke for itself across every platform. Meetings with investors were collaborative, not hierarchical, giving her team autonomy they had never experienced before. The culture was deliberate, built on merit, transparency, and the trust that had been absent in their previous company. Each success reinforced the values Ava had championed, proving that integrity could create wealth and influence simultaneously. NovaForge's brand became synonymous with innovation and fairness, attracting clients and talent who shared their ethos. Ava's leadership style was calm but firm, a combination of empathy and authority that inspired loyalty rather than fear. She remembered the long nights at Sterling Dynamics and the betrayal that had almost destroyed her spirit. Now, those experiences fueled her decisions, making her more strategic, more aware of both people and systems. Richard Cole, in contrast, had faded into irrelevance, occupying a tiny rented office with failing live streams and empty meetings. The empire he had once commanded now served as a cautionary tale, his arrogance and manipulation exposed to the public. Every article about Sterling's collapse reinforced the contrast between destructive leadership and Ava's constructive vision. Ethan Cole attempted to reach out, seeking reconciliation, but Ava's response was polite and final, refusing to re-engage. Her team celebrated milestones quietly, knowing that their achievements were genuine and self-earned, untainted by politics. Ava made decisions with clarity, weighing risks, but never compromising on principles that had guided her since the beginning. NovaForge began to expand, opening new offices and recruiting talent, all while maintaining the close-knit, collaborative culture. The company's products launched successfully, garnering praise for both innovation and ethical business practices. Ava participated in conferences and panels, her presence commanding respect as a leader who had rebuilt her life from betrayal. She spoke of vision, teamwork, and perseverance, never needing to mention the obstacles she had overcome to prove herself. Richard Cole's attempts to re-enter the industry were ignored, his reputation permanently linked to failure and manipulation. The media contrasted NovaForge's rise with Sterling's fall, highlighting Ava as a symbol of the modern, ethical leader. Ava occasionally glanced at news headlines, reminded of the empire she had left behind and the emptiness it represented. Her focus remained on growth, innovation, and maintaining a company where talent and effort were always recognized. Every success of NovaForge validated her choice to leave and reinforced the lessons she had learned through hardship. Her team thrived under her leadership, each member empowered to take initiative and contribute to the company's vision. Investors and clients trusted Ava, not just for her skill, but for her integrity, the foundation of NovaForge's reputation. Months of hard work had transformed betrayal into opportunity, and Ava now stood as a leader unchallenged in credibility. The company's trajectory was unstoppable, a testament to strategy, talent, and the refusal to compromise on values. Ava looked out at her team one evening, smiling, knowing they had built more than a company, they had created a legacy. Richard Cole's downfall remained a distant echo, a lesson in hubris, while NovaForge's rise shone brightly as proof of resilience. Every line of code, every strategy session, every late night reinforced the truth. Success achieved honestly endures. Ava's vision had become reality, and the future was theirs, untainted, unlimited, and entirely self-determined. Ava stood on the stage, the spotlight warm against her face, the audience silent in anticipation. Her team sat behind her, proud, confident, each person a living testament to their journey and struggle. The conference hall buzzed with curiosity, investors and journalists eager to witness the rise of NovaForge. Ava took a deep breath, her voice steady, speaking of vision, integrity, and the power of collaboration. She told the story of building a company from nothing, of overcoming betrayal without losing herself. The crowd listened, captivated by the clarity and strength in her words, inspired by her calm authority. She never mentioned sterling dynamics, never spoke of revenge, only focused on what had been achieved. Every anecdote she shared highlighted resilience, teamwork, and the value of recognizing true talent. Ava concluded with a message about the new era of leadership, where respect and fairness outshine power. The applause was thunderous, genuine, a recognition of not just success, but of principles upheld. Emails and messages arrived instantly, confirming that NovaForge had become a symbol of innovation and ethics. Ava smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift, replaced by the excitement of limitless possibilities ahead. She looked at her team, nodded once, and in that simple gesture conveyed gratitude, pride, and trust. No revenge had been taken, no bitterness lingered, only achievement, respect, and a future fully earned. Ava had stepped out of the shadows, not as a fighter, but as a guide for the next generation of leaders. The journey had ended, but their story, their legacy, was just beginning.